Hmm. Look at those people. I wonder who they are.
Welcome back to Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be telling a story from the Bible, then from Dragon Song.
Starting with chapter 10.
Yeah, we're starting it on chapter 10. Just because.
And there's only 4 chapters left in this book, so we very quickly have to figure out what we're doing after this. That's assuming we can find it. All right, so we're doing Dragon Singer next. So we've been doing these crystals, and Kimmy's showing you hers. It's pretty.
Mine's the best.
Kimmy's is the best.
You don't know that? Yes, I do. Mine is the best.
So who's going to join us today? Who wants to know what our Bible passage is going to be? Remember, we just finished Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. That is found in the New Testament. It is 4 of Paul's shorter books that are found in the New Testament, with 6 chapters, 6 chapters, 4 chapters, 4 chapters. So it's a total of 20 chapters. I'm just waiting for somebody to join so I can drum roll, present what the next one is. Kimmy, have you sent the links?
No.
Oh, we don't know where Kimmy's phone went.
Did you call it?
I can't. So
Like right there.
I definitely got a notification saying that I'm live. So that's always good when Facebook tells me that I'm live. So I know, just in case I didn't realize that I was live. I guess if somebody else is on my account trying to go live, then it would affect it, right? Yeah. Okay, so who's going to be the first one to join us? Join us. Still can't find Kimmy's phone.
Did you call it?
My phone's right there. Oh, somebody's online. Hi, somebody. Hi, Mom. Kimmy. Okay, Kim. This is your chance to look for it. Hi, Rebecca. Are you ready to find out what our Bible story is for today? We've been waiting for you. Okay. Kimmy still can't find her phone, but Becca's here.
Is it still ringing?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so. So we're calling Kimmy's phone because she can't find it. Yep. She either said yep because she's here, or she said yep because she can't wait to find out what we're reading next. So I'll just assume that it's the other one. Can't wait to find out what we're reading next. In the Bible, I've got my Bible here. We just finished Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. That's the General Electric Power Company. 4 books written by Paul, actually at various times, although oh, good. Kimmy found her JJ found her phone. That was good. Okay, so we are flipping to the Old Testament now. As I said, I like to ping pong back and forth from the Old Testament to the New Testament and back again. And at this time, I see 2 people. At this time, we are going to go to this book. Is one of my favorite 39 books in the Old Testament. One of the top 39, I have no doubt. And also named after a fine young man Oh, Daniel guessed it. It's Daniel. There it is. All right. So we're going to read the 12 chapters of the book of Daniel and then go to probably one of the Gospels. So here we are. I was debating between Mark and Luke. More to follow. All right. So Daniel chapter 1. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible. I don't have the link to send to you, and I've already spent enough time rambling. So I will just jump right in to Daniel chapter 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and we would know who that is if we had read about all the kings. There's the whole list of chronologies and kings and all of that exists in the history writings, but this happens at the very, very end of the history writings portion of the Old Testament. So in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar. I got distracted, I'm sorry. He brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them the names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach, and Azrael he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink, for why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who were of your own age, and you would endanger my head with the king? In other words, if Daniel doesn't look good, then the king might take it out on the eunuch. And Nebuchadnezzar's not known for being that kind. I lost my place. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. I can't read this without thinking about VeggieTales, sorry. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. So, yeah, I can't help but think maybe they're eating Bob and Larry. So maybe that's what it is. But I do not know if Babylon was Zoroastrian at this time or not. That would be interesting to research. Because when he talks about all the chief, where was it? The enchanters and whatever it said, the magicians and enchanters. I know that there was a whole caste system of magicians and enchanters in Zoroastrian Babylon. So that would be an interesting thing to research. I will see what I can come up with before tomorrow. And I hope you're enjoying Daniel. And now I think Kimberly has a synopsis to give you. And she is on her way now. So if I don't get back to you before the live stream cuts out, because I'm going to be listening and I will be on a lag, but if I don't get back, then have a good night. God bless you. And we will read Daniel again tomorrow. So, all right. Oh, I forgot to skip that.
So what happened in the last few chapters was so I keep wanting to call her Melanie. Manoli. Okay. Okay. So Menali, she basically she had a few more days of living with fire lizards, and then when she was out collecting food, she got caught in thread, and so she tried to run over to her cave, but before she could get there, the thread came over, and this dragon rider, he saved her, and then he thought that she was a he, so he took her over to basically the biggest, like one of the biggest cities where all the dragon riders live and everything, so that they could heal her feet, which were torn up because their shoes were basically. She was actually thinking before the thread came how she would fix her shoes, and they were like really broken. So her feet were like really badly hurt. So people are healing them right now. And after that, her fire lizards, they're looking for her right now. They don't know like where she is. So I'm hoping that she'll tell the person who brings her back, hopefully the same dragon rider that took her over there. I hope that she tells him to take her over into that area so that she can walk home. And not straight to the hold, which would mean, you know, that she has to see her family again. Like, honestly, I hope she never sees her parents again. They're the worst.
Nice. People can change. Hi.
Not those people. They're the worst parents ever. In the history of everything.
I don't know.
They're even worse than the devil.
Be quiet, Daniel. I did a thing. Did a thing yesterday.
What did it do?
I did a thing yesterday. I got a haircut. Okay, so yes, that's why I was not available yesterday to read, and we kind of took a night off. So, all right, here we are, chapter 10 of Dragon Song by Anne McCaffrey. Then my feet took off and my legs went too, so my body was obliged to follow. Me with my hands and my mouth full of cress and my throat too dry to swallow. When mentally roused, she was in a quiet, dark place, and something crooned comfortingly in her ear. She knew it was Beauty, but she wondered how she could be so warm all over. She moved, and her feet felt big, stuffed, and very sore. She must have made some sound because she heard a soft movement, and then the glow in the corner of the room was unshielded. Are you comfortable? Are your feet painful? The warmth beside Menelly's ear disappeared. Clever Beauty, Menelly thought with approval after an instant's fear of discovery. Someone was bending over Menelly now, securing the sleeping furs about her shoulders. Someone whose hands were gentle, soothing, who smelled of clean herbs and faintly of numbweed. They only hurt a little, Menelly replied untruthfully, because her feet had taken to throbbing so hard she was afraid the woman could hear them. Her soft murmur and her gentle hands denied Menelly's stoicism. You must surely be hungry. You've slept all day. I have? We gave you Fellis juice. You'd run your feet to ribbons. There was a slight hesitation in the woman's voice. They'll be fine in a 7-day. No serious cuts. The quiet voice held a ripple of amusement. Tigran is convinced you're the fastest runner in Pern. I'm not a runner. I'm just a girl. Not just a girl. I'll get you something to eat, and then it's best if you sleep again. Alone, Menelly tried not to think of her throbbing feet and a body which felt stone heavy, immobile. She worried for fear Beauty or some of the others would come and be discovered by the weir woman, and what would happen to Lazy with no one to make him hunt for himself. And I'm Minora, the woman said as she returned with a bowl of steaming stew and a mug. You realize that you're at Bendon Weir. Good. You may stay here, as long as you wish. I can? A relief of intense of as intense as the pain in her feet flooded mentally. Yes, you can. And the firmness of that reply made that right inalienable. Menelly is my name. She hesitated because Minora was nodding. How did you know? Minora motioned for her to continue eating. I've seen you at Half Circle, and the Harper asked the wing leader to keep search for you after you disappeared. We won't discuss that now, Menelly, but I do assure you that you can stay at Benton. Please don't tell them. As you wish. Finish your stew and take all the drink. You must sleep to heal. She left as noiselessly as she'd come, but Menelly was reassured. Minora was head woman at Bendenweir, and what she said was so. The stew was delicious, thick with meat chunks and satisfying with herb flavors. She'd almost finished it when she heard a faint rustle as Beauty returned, piteously broadcasting hunger. With a sigh, Menelly pushed the bowl under the little queen's nose. Beauty licked it dry, then hummed softly and rubbed her face against Menelly's cheek. Where are the others? Menelly asked worriedly. The little queen gave another hum and began to curl herself up in a ball by Menelly's shoulder. She wouldn't have been so relaxed if the others were in trouble, Menelly thought, as she sipped the Fellis juice. Beauty, Menelly whispered, nudging the queen, if anyone comes, you go. You mustn't be seen here. Do you understand? The queen rustled her wings irritably. Beauty, you mustn't be seen. Menelly spoke as sternly as she could, and the queen opened one eye, which whirled slowly. Oh dear, you won't understand. The queen gave a soft, reassuring croon and then closed both lids. The Fellis juice was already melting Menelly's limbs into weightlessness. The dreadful throb of her feet eased, and her eyes relentlessly closed. Menelly had one last thought. How had Beauty known where she was? When Menelly woke, it was to hear faint sounds of children laughing, an infectious laughter that made her grin and wonder what caused such happiness. Beauty was gone, but the space where she'd lain by Menelly's head was warm to the touch. The curtain across the cubicle parted, and a figure was silhouetted against the light beyond. I'm going to count to 3. I want both of you in your beds by then, or there will be no screen time tomorrow. In your bed. Please may I use the restroom? Yes. Daniel, pajamas. And get all the way in bed. What's the matter with you all of a sudden, Repa? The girl said softly to someone Menelly couldn't see. Oh, all right. I'm well rid of you for now. She turned and saw Menelly looking at her. How do you feel today? As she adjusted the glow for full light, Mentally saw a girl about her own age, dark hair tied primly back from a face that was sad, tired, and oddly mature. Then she smiled, and the impression of maturity dissolved. Close your windows. Did you really run across Narat? I really didn't, although my feet feel as if they did. Imagine that, and you hold bread and out during a fall. There was a grudging respect in her voice. I was running for shelter, Mentally felt obliged to say. Speaking of running, Minora couldn't come to see you herself right now, so you're in my charge. She told me exactly what to do. And the girl grimaced with such feeling that Mentally had a swift vision of Minora delivering her precise and careful instructions. And I've had a lot of experience. An expression of pain and anxiety crossed her face. Are you Minora's fosterling? Asked Mentally politely. The expression deepened for a moment, and then the girl erased all expression from her face, drawing her shoulders up with pride. No, I'm Brex. My name is Miriam. I used to be in the Southern Weir. She made the statement as if that would make all plain to Minoli. You mean in the southern continent? Yes, said Miriam, and she sounded irritated. I didn't know anyone lived there. The words were no sooner out of her mouth than Mentally remembered some snippet of information overheard in conversations between Petrion and her father. Where have you been all your life? Demanded Miriam, exasperated. In Half Circle Seahold, Mentally replied meekly because she didn't wish to offend the girl. Miriam stared at her. Haven't you ever heard of it? It was Menelly's turn to be condescending. We have the biggest dock cavern in Pern. Miriam caught her eye, and then both girls began to laugh, the moment on which their friendship began. Look, let me help you to the necessary, and you must be bursting. And Miriam briskly threw back the sleeping fur. You just lean on me. Mentally had to because her feet were incredibly sore, even with Miriam supporting most of her weight. Fortunately, the necessary was no more than a few steps beyond the sleeping cubicle. By the time Mentally crawled back into her bed, she was shaking all over. Stay on your stomach, Mentally. It'll be easier to change your bandages, Miriam said. I haven't had to do many feet, it's true, but if you don't have to see what's going on, that makes it easier. Everyone at Southern said my hands are gentle, and I'll drown your feet in numbweed. Or would you want some more Fellis juice? Minora said you could. Mentally shook her head. Brack, and here Miriam's voice faltered briefly. Brack taught me how to change sticky bandages because oh dearie me, your feet look just like raw meat. Oops, that's not the right thing to say. And they do, but they will be all right, Minora said. And there was such confidence in that statement that Mentally preferred to believe it too. Now, thread score, that's nasty. You've just lost all the skin on your feet. That's all. But I expect you feel that's quite enough. Sorry, caught you there. Anyway, you'll not even have scars once the new skin grows, and it's really amazing how quickly skin does grow, or so I've observed. Now, thread score, that's nasty for healing, never quite fades. Lucky for you, Tigran's Brent spotted you running. Dragons are very long-sighted, you know. There, now, this should help. Mentally gasped involuntarily as Miriam slathered cool numbweed on her right foot. She'd been biting her lips against the pain while Miriam, with very gentle hands indeed, had removed the blood-caked bandages, but the relief from pain was almost a shock. If she'd only lost the skin from her feet, why did they hurt so much more than her hand had? All right, boys, bed. I want to hear yes, ma'ams, and I want you in bed. Thank you. Now we've only the left foot to go. The numbweed does help, doesn't it? Did you ever have to boil it? Miriam asked with a groan, and as usual, didn't wait for an answer. For 3 days, I just grit my teeth and close my nose and firmly remind myself that it would be so much worse if we didn't have numbweed. I suppose that's the bad with the good Minora's always saying we have to have. But you'll be relieved to know that there's no sign of infection. Infection? Mentally jerked herself up on her elbows, craning her head about. Will you keep still? Miriam glared so authoritatively that Mentally forced herself to relax. All she could see of her feet were salve smeared heels. And you're very, very lucky there isn't any infection. After all, you'd been running shoeless over sand, dirt, and goodness knows what. It took us forever to wash the grit off. Miriam, mad, Miriam made a sympathetic sound, just as well we dosed you good. Hi. You're sure there's no infection this time? This time? You haven't done this before, have you? Miriam's voice was shocked. No, not my feet, my hand. Um, and mentally turned on her side, holding out her scarred hand. She was considerably gratified by the concerned pity in Miriam's face as she examined the wound. However did you do that? I was gutting Pactail and the knife slipped. You were lucky to miss the tendons. Miss? Well, you are using your fingers. A bit drawn, that scar, though. Miriam clucked her tongue with professional dismay. Don't think much of your holds nursing, if that's any sample. Packtail slime is difficult, as bad as thread score in its own way, mentally muttered, pervasively defending her hold. Be that as it may, and Miriam gave the foot bandage a final twitch. We'll see you don't have such trouble with your feet. Now, I'll bring you something to eat. You must be starved. Now that the worst of the dressing was over and the numbweed had deadened the pain in her feet, Mentally was definitely aware of the emptiness in her stomach. So I'll be right back, Mentally, and if you need anything after that, just shout for Sanra. She's below on the floor, minding the little ones, and she knows she's to listen for you. As Mentally worked her way through the generous meal Miriam brought, she reflected on some harsh truths. Definitely, Mavi had given her the distinct impression that she'd never be able to use her hand again. Yet Mavi was too skilled a healer not to have known that the knife had missed the finger tendons. She had deliberately let the hand heal with drawn flesh. It was painfully clear to Mentally that Mavi, as well as Giannis, had not wanted her to be able to play again. Grimly, Mentally vowed that she'd never, never return to Half Circle. Her reflections made her doubt Minora's assurance that she could stay at Bendon Weir, no matter. She could run away again. Run she could and live holdless, and that's what she'd do. Why, she'd run across all Pern. And why not? Mentally became pleased with the notion. Indeed, there was nothing to stop her from running right to the Master Harper Hall in Fort Hold. Maybe Petrion had sent her songs to Master Harper Robinson. Maybe they were more than just twiddles. Maybe, but there was no maybe about returning to Half Circle Hold. That she would not do. The issue did not arise over the next few days while her feet itched. Miriam said that was a good sign of healing, and she found herself beginning to fret with impatience at her disability. She also worried about her fire lizards now she wasn't able to forage for them. But the first evening when Beauty reappeared, her little eyes darting about the chamber to be sure Mentally was alone, there was nothing of hunger in her manner. She daintily accepted the morsels that Mentally had carefully saved from her supper. Rocky and Diver appeared just as she was drifting off to sleep. However, they promptly curled themselves up to sleep against the small of her back, which they wouldn't have done if they'd been hungry. They were gone the next morning, but Beauty lingered, stroking her head against Menelly's cheek until she heard footsteps in the corridor. Menelly shooed her away, telling her to stay with the others. I know it's boring to stay in bed, Miriam agreed the third morning with a weary sigh that told Menelly Miriam would gladly have swapped places. But it's kept you out of Lessa's way. Since well, and Miriam censored what she'd been about to say, with Raymond broody over those eggs, we're all treading hot sands until they hatch, so it's better you're here. There must be something I can do now that I'm better. I'm good with my hands, and then Mentally too halted uncertainly. You could help Sanra with the little ones if you would. Can you tell any stories? Yes, and Mentally all but blurted out what she'd done at the Sea-Hold. It can at least keep them amused. Wire-bred children were not like Hold children, Mentally discovered. They were more active physically, possessed of insatiable curiosity for every detail she cared to tell them about fishing and sailing. It was only when she taught them to fashion tiny boats of sticks and wide root leaves and sent them off to sail the skiffs in the Weir Lake that she had any rest the first morning. In the afternoon, she amused the younger ones by recounting how Tigran had rescued her. Thread was not as automatically horrifying to Weir children as it would be to Holders, and they were far more interested in her running and rescue than in what she was running from. Unconsciously, she fell into a rhythm pattern and caught herself up sharply just before she conceived a tune. The children didn't seem to notice, fortunately, and then it was time to peel tubers for the evening meal. It was difficult to subdue that little tune as she worked. Really, it had exactly the cadence of her running stride. "Oh, did you cut yourself?" said Sanra from the other side of the table. "No," replied Manali, and she grinned with great good humor. She had just realized something very important. She wasn't in the sea hold any longer, and no one here knew about her harpering. Likewise, no one would know if it were her own songs she hummed when she felt like humming. So she began to hum her running song and was doubly pleased with herself because the tune matched her pairing strokes too. "It's a relief to hear someone happy," remarked Sanra, smiling encouragingly at Meneley. Meneley realized then that been vaguely aware all day of the fact that the atmosphere in the living cavern reminded her of those times when the fishing fleet was overdue in a storm and everyone was waiting. Miriam was very worried about Breck, but she wouldn't say why, and Meneley was reluctant to broach the girl's sad reserve. "I'm happy because my feet are healing," she told Sandra, and then hurried on. "But I wish someone would tell me what's wrong with Breck. I know Miriam's worried sick about her." Sandra stared at Meneley for a moment. "You mean you haven't heard about—" She lowered her voice and glanced about to make sure they weren't overheard. "About the queens?" "No, and no one tells girls anything at the Sea-Hold." Sandra looked surprised, but accepted her explanation. "Well, Breck used to be at Southern. You did know that. Good. And when Falar banished all the rebellious old-timers to Southern, the Southerners had to go somewhere. Tabor became Weir leader at Fort Hold. Kilara," and Sandra's usually gentle voice became hard, "Kilara was Weir woman for Prideth with Breck and Wirith." Sandra was having enough trouble telling the tale, so Meneley was very glad she hadn't asked Mira. "Wirith rose to mate, but Kylara," and the name was spoken with intense hatred. "Kylara hadn't taken Prideth far enough away. She was close to mating too, and when Wirith flew the bronzes, she rose and—" There were tears in Samra's eyes, and she shook her head, unable to continue. "Both queens died?" Sunra nodded. "Breck's alive, though, isn't she?" "Kilara lost her mind, and we're desperate afraid that Breck will lose hers." Sandra mopped the tears from her face, sniffing back her sorrow. "Poor Miriam, and she's been so good to me." Sandra sniffled again, this time from pique. "Miriam likes to think she's got the cares of the Weir on her shoulders. Well, I've a lot more respect for her the way she keeps on going when she's worried sick than if she crept off someplace and just felt sorry for herself." Sandra stared at Meneley. "No need to bristle at me, girl, and if you keep on stabbing your knife that way, you will cut yourself." "Will Breck be all right?" asked Meneley after a few minutes' strict attention to her peeling. "We hope so," but Sandra didn't sound confident. "No, we do. You see, Rameth's clutch is about to hatch unless it is certain that Breck could impress the queen. You see, she can't speak to any of the dragons the way Lessa can, and Grawl and Bird are always with her. Here comes Miriam." Meneley had to admit that Miriam, who only numbered the same turns as she did assume an officious manner. She could understand that an older woman like Sandra might not take kindly to it, yet Meneley had no fault to find with Miriam's ministrations, and she let the girl bustle her off to her cubicle to change the bandages. "You've been on them all day, and I want to be sure no dirt's in the scabs," she said briskly. Meneley obediently lay on her stomach in the bed and then tentatively suggested that perhaps tomorrow she could change her own bandages and save Miriam some work. "Don't be silly. Feet are very awkward, but you're not. You should just hear Catral complain. He got thread scored during the last fall. You'd think he was the only one ever in the world scored, and besides, Minora said I was to take care of you. You're easy. You don't moan, groan, complain, and swear like a catral. Now, these are healing nicely, in spite of the way it might feel to you. Minora says that feet hurt worse than any part of your body but hands. That's why it seems so much worse to you, I expect. Menelly had no argument and breathed a sigh of relief that the painful session was now over. You taught the Weirlings how to make those little boats, didn't you? Menelly flipped over, startled, and wondered if she'd done wrong, but Miriam was grinning. You should have seen the dragons snorting those about the lake, Miriam giggled, having the grandest time. I haven't laughed so much in weeks. There you are, and Miriam bustled away on some other errand. The following day, Miriam hovered beside her. Menelly walked slowly and not too painfully through the living cavern and into the main kitchen cavern for the first time. Raymond's eggs are just about to hatch, Miriam told her as she placed Menelly at one of the work tables along the back side of the huge cave. There's nothing wrong with your hands, and we'll need all the help we can get for the feast. And maybe your Breck will be better? Oh, she's got to be, Menelly. She's got to be. Miriam scrubbed her hands together anxiously. If she isn't, I don't know what will become of her and Fenor. He cares so much. Minora's as worried about him as she is about Breck. It'll all come right, Miriam. I'm sure it will, Menelly said, putting all the confidence she could muster into her voice. Oh, do you really think so? Miriam dropped her pose of bustling efficiently and was briefly a young, bewildered girl in need of reassurance. I most certainly do, and mentally was angry with Sanra's unkind statements of the day before. Why, when I thought I'd be scored to death, Tigrana appeared, and when I thought they'd all be threaded, Minoli hastily shut her mouth, frantically trying to think of something to fill the gap. She'd almost told Miriam about saving the fire lizards. They must belong to somebody, a man said in a loud, frustrated tone of voice. Two dragon riders entered the kitchen cavern, slapping dusty gloves against sandy boots and loosening their riding belts. They could be attracted by the ones we have, Stigellen, considering how badly we need the creatures in the egg. It's a raking nuisance to have a whole flaming fair that no one will claim. The next thing Minelly knew, Beauty appeared over her head, gave a terrified squawk, and landed on Minelly's thin clad shoulder. Beauty wrapped her tail choking tight about Minelly's neck and buried her face into her hair. Rocky and Diver seized the cloth of her shirt in their claws, struggling to burrow into her arms. The air was full of frightened fire lizards diving at her, and Miriam, who made no attempt to defend herself, stared with utter amazement at Benelli. Miriam, do they belong to you after all? Cried Tagellin as he strode towards their table. No, they're not mine, Miriam pointed to Menelly. They're hers. Menelly was speechless, but she managed to contain Rocky and Diver. The others took refuge on ledges above her, broadcasting fear and uncertainty. She was just as confused as the fire lizards because why were they in the weir? And the weir seemed to know about fire lizards, and we'll soon know whose they are, said a woman's angry voice, carrying clearly in the pause. A small, slim woman in riding gear came striding purposely into the main section of the kitchen cavern. I asked Raymond to speak to them. She was followed by another rider. Over here, Lessa, Tagellin said, beckoning, but his gaze did not leave Manoli's. At the sound of that name, she struggled out of the chair, and the fire lizards squawking and trying to retain their balance and hold on her. All Menelly could think of was to keep out of Lessa's way, but she got tangled up in the chairs about the table and painfully stubbed her toes. Miriam grabbed her arm, trying to make her sit down, and there seemed to be more fire lizards than Menelly could claim, circling over her head and chittering wildly. Will someone quiet this lot? Demanded the small dark woman, confronting Menelly, her fists on her riding belts. Her eyes snapped with anger. Ramoth, if you would. Abruptly, complete silence reigned in the huge kitchen cavern. Menelly felt Beauty trembling more violently than ever against her neck, and the talons of the two bronzes dug into her arms and sides. That's better, said Lessa, her eyes brilliant. And who are you? Are these all yours? My name is Menoli. Please, and Menelly glanced up nervously at all the fire lizards perched silently with whirling eyes on ledges and hanging from the ceiling. Not all of these are mine. Mentally, some of Lessa's anger abated at her perplexity. Mentally? She was trying to place the name. Minora told you about her, Lessa, said Miriam, which mentally thought greatly daring and very much appreciated. Tigran rescued her from Threadfall. She'd run her feet raw. Ah, yes. So, mentally, how many fire lizards do look to you? Mentally was trying to figure out whether Lessa was annoyed or pleased, and if she had too many fire lizards, would she be sent back to Half Circle? She felt Miriam prod her in the ribs. These mentally indicated the three clinging to her and felt Miriam dig her again. And only 6 of those up there. Only 6 of those up there. Mentally saw Lessa's fingers drumming on her wide riding belt. She heard one of the dragon riders muffling a sound and glancing up saw that he had his hand over his mouth, but his eyes were dancing with laughter. Then she dared look at Lessa's face and saw the slight smile on the werewoman's face. That makes 9, I think, Lessa said. Just how did you contrive to impress 9 fire lizards, Mentally? I didn't contrive. I was in the cave when they hatched, and they were very hungry, you see. I had a sack full of spider claws, so I fed them. Cave? Where? Lessa's words were crisp but not unkind. On the coast, above Nerat, by the dragon stones. Tigellin uttered an explanation. You were living in the cave? I found jars and pots, no sign of fire lizard shells. I didn't think fire lizards clutched in caves, Lessa remarked. It was only because the tide was high and the clutch would have been washed away. I helped the queen put them into the cave. Lessa regarded Menelly steadily for a long moment. You helped the fire lizard. Yes, you see, I'd fallen over the cliff, and the queen and her bronzes from the old clutch, not these here. And Menelly jerked her chin at Beauty, Rocky, and Diver. They wouldn't let me get off the beach until I helped them. Tigellin was staring at her, but the other 2 riders were grinning broadly. Then Menelly saw that Miriam, too, was smiling with delight. More unbelievable to Menelly in her confusion was the fact that a little brown fire lizard was perched on Miriam's shoulder, intently staring at Beauty, who wouldn't take her head out of Menelly's hair. I'd like to hear the whole story in sequence one day, Lessa said. Right now, will you please keep your lot under control and with you? They're upsetting Ramoth and all the others. 9, eh? And Lessa sighed, turning away. When I think where I could use 9 eggs to good purpose. Please, do you need more fire lizard eggs? Lessa whirled so fast that Menelly took an involuntary backward step. Of course we need fire lizard eggs. Where have you been that you don't know? She turned on Tigellin. You're, you're a wing leader. Didn't you inform all the Seaholds? Yes, I did, Lessa. And Tigellin looked straight at Menelly now, just about the time Menelly first disappeared from her hold. Right, Menelly? The sweep riders have been on the lookout for her ever since, but she was holed up snug as you please in that cave with 9 fire lizards. Mentally hung her head in despair. Please, werewoman, don't send me back to Half Circle Hold. A girl who can impress 9 fire lizards, said Lessa in a sharp, rippling tone that made Menelly look up, does not belong in a sea hold. Tigellin, find out from Menelly where that clutch is and secure it for us immediately. Let us fervently hope it hasn't hatched. To Menelly's intense relief, Lessa actually smiled at her, obviously in a much improved temper. Remember to keep those pesky creatures away from Ramoth. Miriam can help you train them. Hers are quite useful now. She swept away, leaving the entire cavern breathless. Activity suddenly picked up on all sides of the kitchen. Mentally felt Miriam pressing into a chair. She sank weakly down. She found a cup of claw in her hands and heard Tigellin urging her to take a few sips. One's first encounter with Lessa is apt to be unnerving. She's so small, Mentally said dazedly. Size is irrelevant. Mentally turned anxiously to Miriam. Did she really mean it? I can stay, Miriam? If you can impress 9 fire lizards, you belong here. But why didn't you tell me about them? Didn't you see mine? I've only the 3. Tigellin clicked his tongue at Miriam, who stuck hers out at him. I told mine to stay in the cave. And here we've been racking our brains, Miriam went on, accusing riders of hoarding eggs. I didn't know your people needed fire lizards. Miriam, stop teasing her. She's unnerved. Mentally, drink your claw and relax, Tigellin told her. Mentally obediently sipped her claw, but she felt obliged to explain about the boys in her sea hold who could think of nothing but snaring fire lizards, and she felt so strongly that she was wrong that she hadn't even mentioned seeing them mating. Under the circumstances, you did just as you should, mentally, said Tigellin. But let's get to that clutch and rescue it. Where did you see it? How close do you think it is to hatching? The eggs were still pretty soft when I found them the day Tigellin rescued me. It's about half a morning's walk from the Dragon Stones. A few minutes glide by Dragonback, but south, north, where? Well, south, there's a stream beads into the sea. Tigellin raised his eyes in exasperation. That describes too many places. You better come with me. Tigellin, Miriam sounded shocked. Menelie's feet are in shreds. So is Les's temper. We'll wrap her feet in hides, but we must get those eggs. And you're not head woman yet, my girl, Tigellin said, waggling a finger at Miriam. It didn't take long to outfit Menelie. Miriam, as if to make up for her officiousness, brought her own weirhide riding jacket and headgear and a pair of vastly oversized boots. They were eased over Menelie's sore and bandaged feet and fastened tightly around her legs with leather strips. Rocky and Diver were reassured by tidbits of meat, and Beauty refused to unwrap her tail from Menelie's neck. She chattered angrily at Tigellin when he half carried Menelie to Monarth, waiting patiently just outside the kitchen cavern. Tigellin threw Menelie up the dragon's shoulder. She hauled herself up to his neck ridges by the fighting straps, giving her feet one or two painful knocks. Tigellin started to settle himself in front of Menelie, but Beauty became alive, hissing menacingly and lashing out at the dragon rider with one foreleg, talons unsheathed. She's never been so bad-tempered, Menelie said apologetically. Monarth, will you speak to her? Asked Tigellin good-naturedly. The next instant, Beauty stopped mid-hiss, chirped experimentally, her eyes whirling less frantically, and her tail relaxed from its chokehold on Menelie's throat. That's a sight better. She does have a baleful stare. Oh dear. I'm teasing you, Menelie. Now, look, I shall have Monarch tell your fair of fire lizards exactly where we're going to do, what we're going to do, so they don't go mad when we take off. Oh, would you? I would, and I. Tigellin paused. I have. We're away. This time, Menelie could enjoy the sensations of flying. She couldn't imagine why Petrion had found the experience so horrible. She didn't even fear the lack of all sensation as they went between. She did feel the bitter, bitter cold in the soles of her half-healed feet, but the pain lasted just such a fleeting second. Abruptly, they were low over the Dragonstones, coming in from the sea. The sheer thrill of the flight took Menelie's breath away. There is a chance that the First Queen might lay another clutch in that cave, Tigellin said over his shoulder, but it should be cleared of your things. So they landed on the beach with Monarth peering rather disapprovingly at the little cove while the water lapped gently on his feet. Her group arrived, caroling in wild delight at coming home. A single fire lizard appeared above and to one side of them. Look, Tigellin, that's the old queen. But she'd gone when Tigellin looked up. I'm sort of sorry she saw us here. I was hoping. Where was the clutch when you rescued it? We're standing on the place. Monarch moved to the side. Does he hear what I'm telling you? Menelie whispered anxiously in Tigellin's ear. Yes, so be careful how you speak of him. He's very sensitive. I haven't said anything, have I, that would hurt his feelings? Menelie, Tigellin looked back at her, grinning. I was teasing you. Oh, yes, well, so you managed to climb that cliff face. It wasn't so hard. If you'll look, you'll see there's plenty of hand and footholds, even before I made a regular path. A regular path? Yes. Monarth, can you get us a bit closer, please? Monarth obligingly angled against the cliff face and raised himself to his haunches. Menelie was amazed to see that they could step off his shoulders right into the cave. Her nine came arrowing into the opening, trumpeting and squealing, their bugles abruptly amplified by the vaulting height of the inner cavern. Just as she and Tegelen reached it, the light was suddenly blocked. Turning, she saw Monarth's head in the opening, his great eyes whirling idly. Monarth, get your great bloody big head out of the light, will you? Said Tegelen. Monarth blinked, gave a little wistful rumble, but removed his great beard, or great head. Y'all, I'm just. Why didn't anyone find you on search, young lady? Tegelen asked, and she saw that he'd been watching her intently. No one's ever been searched at Half Circle Seahold. That shouldn't surprise me. Now, where did the old queen have her clutch? Right where you're standing. Tegelen jumped sideways, giving her a second admonitory look, which she couldn't interpret. He knelt, running his fingers through the sand, making pleased noises in his throat. You tossed out the old shells? Yes. Was that wrong? I don't think so. Would she come back here again? She might, if the cove waters remain high the next time she mates. Do you happen to remember when you saw her mating flight? Yes, I do, because we had Threadfall just after, the one when the leading edge hit the marshes halfway to Nerat. Good girl. Tegelen tipped his head back, pressing his lips together, and mentally thought he was doing some rapid mental calculations. Elamai had a similar habit when he was charting a course. Yes, and when did these hatch? I lost track of my 7 days, but they hatched 5 falls ago. That's great. She may mate before a high summer if fire lizards follow the same sort of cycle the dragons do during a pass. He glanced around him at the bits and pieces with which she had made the cave livable. Do you want any of these things? Not many, mentally said, and dove for her sleeping rug. Her pipes were still there, so he hadn't seen them in his first visit to the cave. She bundled the rug around the pipes again. My oil, she said, grabbing up the pot. I'll need that. Not really, said Tegelen with a grin, but bring it along. Menora's always interested in such things. She took her dried herbs, too, and made a great package which she could tie on her back. Ruthlessly, then she began to chuck her homemade crockery out of the cave entrance. Oh, aghast she rushed to the mouth, looking about for Monarth. You missed him. He's got more sense than to stay around when there's a cleaning. With that, Tegelen launched her boiling pot into the air. That's everything, I think, she said. Let's go. At the entrance, Menely turned for one last look at the cave and smiled to herself. She'd never thought to leave it, certainly not to step to the shoulders of a dragon, but then she'd never thought she'd live in a cave like this at all, much less ride a dragon. Nothing now marked that anyone had ever sheltered in this cave. Even the dry sand was falling back into the depressions their feet had made. Tegelen held out his hand to help her to Monarth's back, and then they were away to find the fire lizard's clutch. Okay. Okay, we have chapter 11 is next, and it is. Okay, it's not long, it's short. So we'll read chapter 11 very quickly. Okay. The little queen, all golden, flew hissing at the sea. To keep it back, to turn it back, she flew forth bravely. Menely and Tegelen brought the 31 eggs of the clutch safely to Bend and Weir without so much as cracking a shell in the furred sack that had been provided for the journey between. Their return caused a flurry of excitement, and the Weirfolk crowding around to examine the eggs. Duly informed, Lessa arrived, imperiously ordering a basket of warm sand from the hatching ground, directing it to be placed by the small sauce hearth, and scrupulously turned at intervals to distribute the heat evenly. She judged that the eggs were in a good 7 day from hatching hardness. As well, she said in her dry fashion, one hatching at a time is enough. Better still, we can present the worthies with their eggs at the impression. She seemed inordinately pleased with that solution and smiled on Menely. Menora says that your feet aren't healed yet, so you're in charge of the clutch. And Felina, get this child out of those ridiculous boots and into some decent clothes. Surely we have something in stores that'll make her look less disreputable. Lessa departed, leaving Menely the object of intense scrutiny. Felina, a tall, willowy woman with very beautiful, curved black eyebrows and green eyes, gave her a long appraisal, sent one helper off for clothing from a special press, another to get the tanner to take Menelie's measure for footwear, a child for her shears because Menelie's hair must be trimmed. Who had hacked it off? They must have used a knife, and such pretty hair, too. Was Menelie hungry? Jagellin had snatched her out of the cavern without a nay, or maybe bring that chair here and push that small table over. Don't stand there gawking. Get the girl something to eat. How many turns do you have? Felina asked on the end of that long series of orders. I've 15, please, answered Menelie, dazed and trying very hard not to cry. Her throat ached and her chest was tight, and she couldn't believe what was happening to her. People fussing over her, how she looked and what she wore. Above all, Lessa had smiled at her because she was so pleased about the clutch, and it seemed as if she didn't have to worry about being sent back to Half Circle. Not if the Weir folk were ordering her shoes and giving her clothes. 15? Well, you wouldn't need much more fostering, would you? Felina sounded disappointed. We'll see what Minora has in mind for you. I'd like you as mine. Menelie burst into tears that provoked more confusion because her fire lizards began swooping dangerously close to people's faces. Beauty pecked at Felina, who was only trying to offer comfort. Let us have some order here, said the freshly authoritative voice. Everyone, except the fire lizards, obediently subsided, and room was made for Minora. And you be quiet too, she said to Squealing Beauty. Go on, and she waved at the others. Go sit quietly somewhere. Now, why is Menelie crying? She just burst into tears, Minora, said Felina, as perplexed as everyone else. I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, Menelie managed to blurt out, each repetition punctuated by a heaving sob. Of course you are, said Minora understandingly, and made gestures to one of the women. It's been a very exciting and tiring day. Now you just drink this. The woman had returned with a mug. Now everyone will go about their duties and let you catch your breath. There, that's better. Menelie obediently sipped the drink. It wasn't Fella's juice, but there was a slightly bitter taste. Minora urged her to drink deeply, and gradually Menelie felt her chest loosen, her throat stop aching, and she began to relax. She looked up to see that Minora was the only one at the little table, sitting with her hands folded serenely in her lap, her aura of calm patience very soothing. Feel more like yourself? Now you just sit quietly and eat. We don't take any new people, so there's bound to be a fuss about you. Soon enough to do everything else. How many fire lizard eggs did you find in that clutch? Menelie found it easy to talk to Minora, and soon she was showing this head woman the oil and explaining how she'd made it. I think you did wonderfully well, all on your own, Menelie, but what I'd expect of someone Mavi had trained. Menelie's ease disappeared at the sound of her mother's name. Involuntarily, she clutched her left hand, feeling the scar tissue pull painfully from the intensity of her grip. You wouldn't like me to send a message to Half Circle, asked Menora, to say that you're safely here. I don't want you to, please. I'm no use to them there. She held her scarred hand and she halted. She'd been about to add a disgrace. I seem to be useful here, she said quickly, pointing to the basket of fire lizard eggs. So you are, Menelie, so you are. Minora rose. Now eat your meat, and we'll talk again later. When she had finished her food, Menelie felt much better. She was content to sit in her hearth corner, watching the industry of colors, and in a little while Felina came over with her shears and trimmed Menelie's hair. Then someone watched the fire lizard eggs while Menelie changed into the first brand new garments she'd ever had, being the youngest in a large family. The tanner came and not only measured her feet for proper boots, but by evening he'd also made up some soft hide slippers that fit loosely over her bandaged feet. She was so changed in appearance that Miriam, passing her table just before the evening meal, almost failed to recognize her. Menelie had been worried that Miriam was deliberately avoiding her because Menelie had impressed 9 fire lizards. But there was no restraint in Miriam's manner. Flopping into a chair across the table, she heartily approved the hair trim, the clothing, and the slippers. I heard all about the clutch, but I've been so busy up, down, in, out, running errands for Minora that I simply haven't had a moment. Menelie suppressed a grin. Miriam sounded exactly like Felina. Then Miriam cocked her head at Meneley. You know, you look so much nicer in proper clothes that I didn't recognize you. Now, if we can only get you to smile once in a while. Just then, a little brown lizard glided in to land on Miriam's shoulder, snuggling affectionately up to her neck and peering at Meneley from under her chin. Is he yours? Yes, this is Tolly, and I have two greens, Repa and Locke. And I'll make it very plain that three is quite enough for me. However did you manage to feed nine? They're so ravenous all the time. The last of Meneley's awkwardness with her friend disappeared as she recounted how she had coped with her fare of fire lizards. The evening meal was then ready, and Miriam, ignoring Benelli's protest that she was able to fetch her own, served them both. Tegelen joined their table and managed to coax Beauty, much to Menelly's amazement, to accept some food from his knife. Don't be surprised, Miriam told Menelly with just a touch of condescension. These greedy guts will eat what's offered from anyone, but that doesn't mean that they'll look to whoever feeds them. Besides, with nine, she rolled her eyes so expressively that Tegelen chuckled. She's jealous, so she is, mentally. I am not. Three's quite enough, though. I would have liked a queen. Let's see if Beauty will come to me. Grawl does. Miriam concentrated on coaxing Beauty to accept a piece of meat while Tegelen teased her, rather unfairly, mentally thought. But Miriam returned his jibes with a few tart remarks of her own in a way that Meneley would never have dared to address an older man, much less a dragon rider. She was very tired, but it was pleasant to sit in the big kitchen cavern, listening to Tegelen, watching Miriam coax Beauty, though it was Lazybones who finally ate from her cup. There were other small groups chattering late over their evening meal, the women pairing with dragon riders. Mentally noticed wineskins being passed. She was surprised at first because the Sea Hold served wine only on very special occasions. Tegelen sent one of the Weir boys to get him cups and a skin and insisted that Meneley, as well as Miriam, have a cup. Good Bendon wine is not to be refused, he told her, filling her cup. There now, isn't that the best you've ever tasted? Meneley forbore to mention that, barring wine laced with Fellis juice, it was the first. Living was con- living was certainly, oh, sorry, can't read. Living was certainly conducted on different rules in the Weir. When the Weir's harper began to play softly, more from his own pleasure than to entertain anyone in the cavern, Meneley did not restrain her fingers from tapping the rhythm. It was a song she liked, though she felt his chords were dull, which was why she began to hum her harmony when it did not discord with his. She wasn't even aware of what she was doing until Miriam looked up with a smile on her face. That was just lovely, Meneley. Or Haran, come over here. Meneley has a new harmony for that one. No, no, I couldn't. Why not? Demanded Tegelen and poured a bit more wine in her glass. A little music would give us all heart. There's faces around here as long as wet turn. Timidly at first, because of the older injunction against singing in front of people, Meneley joined her voice to Harper Oran's baritone. Yes, I like it, Meneley. You've got a sure sense of pitch. And Aharon said Aharon so approvingly that she started to worry again. If Giannis knew she was singing in the weir, but Giannis wasn't here, and he would never know. Say, can you harmonize to this one? And Aharon broke into one of the older ballads, one in which she had always sung a countertune against Petrion's melody. Suddenly, there were other voices humming along, softly but surely. Miriam looked around, stared suspiciously at Tegelen, and then pointed at Beauty. She's humming in tune. Mentally, however did you teach her to do that? And the others, some of them are singing too. Miriam was wide-eyed with amazement. O'Haran kept on playing, nodding at Miriam to be quiet so they could all hear the fire lizards, while Tegelen craned his head and cocked his ears, first at Beauty, then at Rocky and Diver, and Brownie, who were near him. I don't believe it, said Tegelen. Don't scare them, just let them do it, said Aharon in a low voice as he modulated his chords into another verse. They finished the song with the fire lizards humming obediently along with Meneley. Miriam demanded then to know how on earth Meneley had gotten her lizards to sing with her. I used to play and sing for them in the cave, you know, to keep us company, just little twiddles. Just little twiddles. I've had my 3 much longer, and I never even knew they liked music. Just shows that you don't know all there is to know, does it? Doesn't it, young Miriam? Teased Gellin. Now that isn't fair, mentally interceded and then hiccuped. To her embarrassment, she hiccuped again. How much wine have you been giving her, Gellin? Demanded Miriam, frowning at the bronze rider. Certainly not enough to put her in the cups. Mentally hiccuped again. Get her some water. Hold your breath, Oharan suggested. Gellin brought water, and with quick sips, mentally managed to stop her hiccuping. She kept insisting that she didn't feel the wine, but she was very tired. If someone would watch the eggs. It was so late. With solicitous help, Gellin and Oharan supported her to her sleeping chamber, Miriam fussing at them that they were two great big numbwits who hadn't a lick of sense between them. Mentally was very glad to lie down and let Miriam remove the slippers and the new clothes and cover her. She was asleep before the fire lizards had disposed themselves about her for the night. That is the end of chapter 11. Chapter 12 we will read tomorrow on Thursday. Yes. And I will desperately look for the next book because this is just the beginning of Menelie's story. It's the next book is actually where like she really comes into her own and herself and really grows as a person. So anyway, I'm going to see if there's any comments. Hi, Granny Bear. Let's see. And Rebecca is sleepy.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so, hi. So I got my step count so I've been listening with my aftershocks, and now I'm at 13,000. So I don't know if you can read that. 13,000 steps. So that's good. Again. Oh, Rebecca says again. Okay, so you need to read it over again. I think that's what she meant. Oh, now she said good night, guys.
Hi, Sorsha.
Oh, maybe she said howdy again. Did she say howdy before? No, she said hi. I'm really confused. Anyway, I hope that everybody's having a good night. I hope you're enjoying the story, Dragon Song. I know I am. I actually haven't read this one. I read a different book by Anne McCaffrey that was not this book. So, and I think I didn't like it as much as I like this book. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope that y'all are having a great night. If you didn't get to listen to the Bible story, then by all means, go back and listen to the Bible story. And if you didn't get to listen to Dragon Song, then you can continue on and you can listen to Dragon Song. I know some of you came in late. So at this point, I will say adieu and have a good night and God bless you. And we will see you again tomorrow.
Good night.